Once upon a time in Israel's desert camp, a mother named Shelomith faced a storm no parent wants. Her son's anger pulled him toward a choice that would affect the whole community. Words are not small, they carry weight. Faithfulness means guiding our words and our loved ones before they break what we cannot fix. Morning in the wilderness began the same way most days did: manna to gather, water to draw, wood to collect before the sun climbed high and fierce. Shelomith tied up her hair with a strip of cloth and stepped into the wide courtyard between the clay dwellings. She adjusted the strap of her water jar and called for her son. Avi stepped reluctantly into the light, his shoulders already tense, his jaw set against the whispers that followed him everywhere. He was taller now, old enough to bear the weight of manhood, yet still too young to hide how deeply the sideways glances stung. His father's Egyptian blood, his mother's Danite roots, people questioned where he belonged, and they did not always whisper quietly. Together they moved through the rows of dwellings belonging to the clan of Dan, her tribe, her family, before turning into the busier market lane where families traded baskets, grain, and news. At the well, a line had formed. Voices rose as two men argued over whose goats had crowded the other's rope. The sharpness in their tone made Shelomith's stomach tighten. She stepped aside to let mothers with children pass. "Hold the jar steady," she reminded her son. "I'm not a child," Avi muttered. "You are my son," she replied softly. "That is not the same." He almost smiled, but his gaze drifted to a group of boys near the well wall. One nudged another, tilted his chin toward Avi, and smirked. Avi's jaw hardened. "I'll go ahead to the grinders," he said, turning too quickly. "Avi!" Shelomith began, but the rope slipped and the jar swayed in her hands. By the time she steadied it, he had already stalked away toward the grain courtyard where families pounded and milled barley. She whispered under her breath, "Lord," set a guard over his lips. When she reached the courtyard, Avi was pushing the grinding wheel hard, forcing the stone to spin too fast, too fine. A man from another clan stood nearby, broad-shouldered, watching with a crooked grin. "Too fine," the man called. "You waste grain like someone who never learned the ways of our fathers." Avi did not look up. "I grind as my mother taught me." The man's grin widened. "Your mother is from Dan. But your father, Egypt, wasn't he? Hard to learn our ways with 1 foot in each land." Shelomith stepped forward quickly. "Enough. We came for bread, not quarrels." The man lifted his hands as though innocent. "Just helping the boy." "I don't need your help," Avi snapped, lifting his head at last. "Everyone needs lessons," the man shot back, "some more than others. A boy with mixed blood forgets who leads Israel." The grinding slowed around them as people began to listen. Goats shifted uneasily in the pens. "If you have a complaint, speak to me," Shelomith said firmly, "not to my son." "I speak to both of you," the man replied. "We have law, we have order. Some think they can drag Egypt into our streets, our homes, even our worship, not while I breathe." Avi's fist clenched. "Say what you mean." The man stepped closer, his eyes sharp. "I mean, strangers walk among us, too proud to admit they are strangers." "Walk away," Shelomith urged her son. "I'm done walking," Avi said, pulling free from her touch. He faced the man directly. "You want something?" "Say it plain." The man's voice rose. "Plain enough. You and your mother should remember your place." The words struck like a slap. Shelomith steadied her voice. "Our place is under the Lord's cloud with all Israel. That is the only place that matters. Is it? The man shouted. Some of us bled lamb's blood on our doorposts in Egypt. Some of us came through the sea with our tribes calling our names. Some of us did not carry Egypt in our bones, another voice sneered from the crowd. Avi barked a bitter laugh. You think my bones are Egypt? You think the manna knows my father's name? I have walked under this same cloud. Do not tell me I do not belong. Enough, Shelomith urged again. We came for bread. But the man jabbed a finger toward the tabernacle. You speak boldly near holy things, boy. Bold words demand holy answers. Then answer me, Avi shot back, but stop waving your finger in my face. The man leaned close, their foreheads nearly touching. Make me! Shelomith pushed between them. Stop, both of you. If this turns into a brawl, the elders will judge. Let me speak. She looked the man in the eye. You don't know my son. His anger is quick, yes, but so was Moses once. The Lord can tame a hot heart. The man sneered. Moses is Levi. Your son is from nowhere. He tilted his head to peer around her. Go back to your mixed house. Leave Israel's disputes to Israel. The crowd murmured. Two elders moved closer now, their eyes fixed on the clash. Shelomith felt the weight of their gaze, and her heart sank. Avi's voice dropped low and dangerous. Say that again. The man grinned. Go back to your mixed house. Avi took a step forward. Shelomith blocked him, hands raised. Son, listen. He kept his eyes on the man. Why should I? Everywhere I go, someone tells me I don't belong. I'm tired of swallowing it. Because the Lord hears, Shelomith said firmly, and because there are words you cannot take back once you speak them. The man spread his arms wide, taunting, Yes, boy. Show us your anger. Show us your mouth. Let everyone see. Avi's chest heaved. His hands shook. His voice cracked like kindling catching flame. You want to hear my mouth? He shouted. Avi! Shelomith cried, her voice rising above the crowd. Faces turned. The elders stiffened. Her son looked at her, his eyes blazing with hurt. What else am I supposed to do? Keep bowing to men who spit at me. Keep nodding to those who call me nobody. Be a son of the Lord, she begged, not an echo of their insults. He tipped his head back, sucking in air like a man drowning. When he lowered it again, the words were on his lips, hot, reckless, final. The crowd pressed in, the elders stepped forward, the man smirked, ready to see the break. Shelomith reached for his hand. Avi, please, don't. But he drew breath, and the whole settlement seemed to hold it with him. The courtyard was so still, it seemed as if the desert itself leaned in to listen. Avi's chest heaved, his lips parted, and then the word came, jagged, burning, sharp as flint. He cursed the holy name of the Lord. Gasps split the crowd like tearing cloth. Mothers clutched their children closer. Elders stepped back in horror. A woman covered her mouth as if the sound itself could not be allowed to escape into the air. Even the goats tethered nearby bleated nervously as if they too felt the weight of it. Shelomith froze, her hand still outstretched toward her son. For one heartbeat, she could not breathe, could not think. She had feared he would lash out at the man. She had prayed he would not raise his fists. But never, never had she imagined her boy would let that word fall from his lips. The man who had taunted him staggered back, triumphant and horrified all at once. Did you hear it? he shouted to the crowd. He cursed the name. He spoke against the God who brought us out. Blasphemy, another voice cried. He must be judged. Elders pressed forward now, robes brushing the ground, faces pale with fury. One raised his staff and pointed. Seize him! Two men lunged and grabbed Avi's arms. He struggled, but their grip was iron. His eyes darted from face to face, not angry now, but suddenly afraid. Wait, he shouted. I didn't mean... You meant every word, the man sneered. And all Israel heard you. Shelomith stumbled forward, her voice breaking. Please, he is young, foolish with anger. You all saw how he was provoked. Let me speak for him. Silence, woman, one elder barked. The word has been spoken. The law must answer. Shelomith's knees went weak. She clutched the edge of the grinder stone to steady herself, her heart pounding so loud she barely heard the voices around her. Lord, what have we done? What will they do to my son? Avi twisted against the men holding him. Mother! His eyes found hers, wide with fear. Don't let them... I am here, Shelomith cried, forcing strength into her voice. She pressed toward him, but the staff of an elder barred her path. The crowd buzzed like a hive struck with a stick. Some whispered that the boy should be stoned at once. Others murmured that the matter must go before Moses. One woman tugged her child away, whispering, Do not even stand near them. Judgment falls hard. The elders conferred quickly, their heads bent together. Then the eldest among them raised his staff again. Take the blasphemer into custody. Bring him to the place of confinement until Moses seeks the Lord's answer. The guards began to drag Avi away. He fought, but their grip was too strong. Let me go, he shouted. His voice cracked, breaking from fury into desperation. I don't belong to Egypt. I don't belong to nowhere. I belong... His words choked off as one man struck him across the mouth to silence him. Shelomith ran after them, pushing through the crowd. Please, he is my son, she begged. At least let me walk with him. One guard gave her a pitying glance but said nothing. Another shoved her back. The elders have spoken. She stumbled to her knees on the dusty ground, her palms scraped stone. She lifted her eyes, and all she saw was Avi's back as the men pulled him toward the holding place near the tabernacle. His shoulders were still squared, but his head hung low. The crowd slowly dispersed, murmuring in frightened tones. Some avoided Shelomith's gaze. Others looked at her with anger, as though the curse had spilled not only from her son, but from her own lips. Asahel, a neighbor, approached hesitantly. Shelomith, he said softly, I am sorry. I heard it. We all did. There is no hiding now. Her voice was hoarse. He is my son. Whatever he said, he is still my son. Asahel shifted uncomfortably. Moses will seek the Lord. The judgment will be clear. She clutched his arm, desperation in her grip. Pray that the Lord shows mercy. But Asahel did not answer. He lowered his eyes and walked away. Shelomith rose slowly, brushing dust from her garments, her body trembling. Around her, the camp carried on. Bread baked, fires crackled, children laughed again. But everything sounded far away, muffled, unreal. She walked the long path toward the tabernacle, her heart pounding with every step. At the entrance, she was stopped by guards. No further, they said. The boy is confined until the word of the Lord comes. I am his mother, Shelomith pleaded. Please, let me speak with him, just for a moment. But the guards stood firm. Not even a mother may enter until Moses returns. She turned away, tears burning her eyes, and pressed her back against the wall of the sacred court. She slid to the ground, arms wrapped around her knees. The desert wind hissed across the stones, carrying the whispers of the people. Blasphemer, curse, judgment. In that moment, Shelomith realized the truth. Her son's words had already traveled farther than she could chase them. They now rested in the ears of the people, in the hands of the elders, and worst of all, before the throne of God himself. As the sun dropped lower and the sky burned red, she whispered, "Lord, remember he is my son. But more than that, remember he is yours. If there is judgment, let it not be without mercy." Inside the holding place, Avi sat alone in silence. Outside, his mother prayed with a trembling voice. And somewhere on the mountain, Moses was about to ask the Lord for an answer that would shake them both. The sound of heavy doors shutting echoed across the courtyard as Avi was locked away under guard. The chamber where he sat was plain, with thick stone walls and a barred entrance. 2 Levites stood on either side, spears in hand, their faces grim. From outside, murmurs still drifted in, voices of people unsettled by what they had heard. Shelomith remained close. She had pressed herself against the wall of the chamber, her ear straining for any sound inside. Once, she heard him pace. Once, she heard him sigh. Her hand trembled as she brushed the stone, as though she could reach him through it. Elders gathered at the tabernacle court. Their voices carried, sharp but hushed. This cannot be ignored. It was heard by many. The law must be clear. When Moses entered, the murmuring stopped. The people stepped back as he walked through with Aaron at his side. His face was weary, his stride steady, but his eyes searched the elders one by one. "Bring me the report," Moses said. An elder bowed slightly and explained what had happened in the grain courtyard, the insult, the taunting, the crowd, and finally, the words that had torn through the camp like a knife. "It was not said in secret," the elder finished. "All heard it." Moses looked toward the chamber where Avi was kept. His eyes lingered there, thoughtful and heavy. Then he turned to Aaron. "The law speaks to many things, but here we must hear from the Lord himself." Aaron nodded. "It cannot be decided by anger or pity, only by the word of God." The elders murmured in agreement. One asked, "Shall we restrain him until you return?" "Yes," Moses said, "let him remain under guard. None must harm him until the Lord gives his answer." When Moses left to seek the Lord's counsel, silence swept the courtyard. People dispersed in uneasy groups, whispering as they went. Only a few remained: the guards, the elders on watch, and Shelomith. She pressed forward until a spear crossed her path. "Please," she begged, "let me see him." "Just for a moment." The guard shook his head. "Orders are clear." He remains alone. A voice spoke from behind her. "Let her speak through the bars." It was Aaron. His face was stern, but his eyes softened when he looked at her. "A mother's words may keep him steady while we wait for Moses." The guard stepped aside. Shelomith hurried forward until her hands gripped the iron bars. Inside, Avi sat hunched against the wall, his head in his hands. "Avi," she whispered. He looked up, startled, then rose quickly and came to the bars. "Mother!" "They treat me like a criminal." His voice cracked. "Do they plan to kill me already?" "No," she said quickly. "Moses has gone to seek the Lord. No one will move until his answer is known." Avi pressed his forehead against the bars. "Then I am finished." "You know what he will say. You know it." Tears stung Shelomith's eyes. I know you are angry. I know their words burned, but Avi, why did you let that word come out? Why the Lord's name? His jaw tightened. Because they call me no one. Because they spit. Because they never let me forget I'm different. I wanted them to feel it too. I wanted them to hurt. Her voice trembled. And now, you've given them what they wanted. They wait to see if the Lord himself will cast you out. Is this what you wished? He turned away, shoulders shaking. For a long moment, he said nothing. Finally, he muttered, I didn't mean to. Not like that. But once it left my mouth, I couldn't take it back. Shelomith reached through the bars, though her fingers barely brushed his sleeve. Listen to me. Whatever comes, you are still my son. If they condemn you, I will not leave you alone. Do you hear me? Avi turned, eyes brimming. But if the Lord condemns me, will you still stand with me then? Her hand tightened on the bars. She could not answer at once. Her throat closed with fear. But at last she whispered, Yes. Even then. A sudden commotion stirred at the edge of the court. A messenger came running, breathless, his voice urgent. Moses has returned. The guard straightened. The elders gathered quickly. Aaron moved toward the tabernacle. All eyes turned to the entrance. Shelomith's heart pounded. Avi gripped the bars. The moment had come. Moses appeared, his face grave, his eyes fixed ahead. He raised his staff, and his voice carried so that all could hear. The Lord has spoken. And in that breathless silence, the camp braced for words that would decide a young man's fate. The entire courtyard hushed as Moses stood with his staff. Guards tightened their grip on their spears. Elders leaned forward. Mothers pulled children closer to their sides. Everyone knew the weight of what was about to be spoken. Moses lifted his hand. The Lord has spoken. The blasphemer shall be brought outside the camp. All who heard him curse shall lay their hands upon his head, and all the assembly shall stone him. Gasps rippled like a wave. Some covered their faces. Others whispered prayers under their breath. The command was clear, and there was no appealing it. The word had been spoken, and the Lord himself had answered. Shelomith staggered back, her knees trembling. She gripped the wall of the chamber for support. No, no, she whispered, not my son. Inside the cell, Avi's face drained of color. He slammed his hands against the bars. Mother, he cried, they can't. His voice broke. They can't do this. The guards shifted uneasily, but they stood firm. One elder approached the bars and declared, Prepare him. The witnesses must lead the way. Shelomith rushed forward, falling to her knees at Moses' feet. Her voice cracked with desperation. Please, he is young. He was provoked. You know the words of men can wound like swords. Surely the Lord has mercy. Moses looked down at her, his expression heavy. Shelomith, daughter of Dibri. The Lord's word is not mine to soften. His name is holy, set apart. Your son cursed that name before all. If we turn aside, the whole camp will despise the command of the Lord. Her tears spilled freely. But he is my son. Moses' voice grew gentler, though no less firm. And the Lord gave him into your arms. You raised him, Shelomith. But now his life rests in the Lord's justice. I will not lie to you. It breaks my heart as much as yours, but the word of the Lord must stand. Avi's fist slammed again on the bars. So this is it? My life for one word? His voice was ragged with fury and fear. All of you, cowards, you cheer while I'm cast out. Enough, one elder barked. Blasphemy brought you here. Do not add rebellion to it. Shelomith pressed her face to the bars, her hands reaching for her sons. Their fingertips touched briefly through the gap. Avi, she wept, listen to me. This is not the end of your soul. The Lord is still judge, and he sees the heart even in the last breath. Cry out to him. Don't let anger be your last word. He gritted his teeth, eyes wet. I don't know if I can. Yes, you can, she urged. You must. Even if the people raise their stones, lift your heart to God. He can hear even the faintest whisper. The guards pulled the door open. Avi staggered as they gripped his arms and hauled him out. The crowd parted as the boy was dragged forward. Murmurs followed in his wake. Some pitied, some judged. Some feared the very sight of him. Make way, an elder called. The witnesses must go with him. The man who had provoked Avi stepped from the crowd with a smug look on his face. Another witness joined him, solemn and pale. They would lay their hands on Avi's head, declaring before all that they had heard the curse with their own ears. Shelomith rose and stumbled after them, but a guard barred her path. Only the witnesses, the elders, and the assembly may go. I am his mother, she cried. Do not shut me out. The guard's face flickered with pity, but his hand did not move. You may follow at a distance. But you cannot stop this. Her heart broke in two. She pressed her fist against her mouth to keep from screaming. Every part of her wanted to claw past the guard, to throw herself over her son, to shield him from what was coming. But her feet betrayed her, stumbling as she followed the procession out of the settlement and toward the barren ground beyond. The crowd grew as people streamed from their courtyards, joining the solemn line. The sound of sandals on stone, the shuffle of robes, the crack of staffs striking the ground, it all pressed on her like a drumbeat of doom. Avi walked ahead, bound at the wrists, shoulders stiff, head bowed. When they reached the rocky clearing outside the camp, the people circled around. Avi stood in the center, the guards at his side. The two witnesses stepped forward and placed their hands on his head. Their voices rang out, clear and chilling. We heard him curse the name of the Lord. Shelomith covered her face. She could not bear to watch, but she could not look away. An elder raised his staff. Let the assembly now act as the Lord has commanded. Stones were gathered, heavy in the hands of men, small in the hands of boys who did not understand the full weight of what they held. The crowd held its breath. Avi lifted his head and searched the faces. For one heartbeat, his eyes found his mother's. There was fear in them, yes, but something more. The faintest flicker of regret. Mother, he called, his voice breaking, pray for me. Shelomith dropped to her knees, her hands trembling toward heaven. Lord, have mercy on my son, she cried. Remember his weakness. Do not let anger be his last word. And then, with the crack of stone striking stone, the judgment began. The first stone struck Avi's shoulder. His cry tore through the clearing, raw and sharp. Another stone followed, then another. The sound was unbearable, rock against flesh, rock against bone, the dull thud of judgment carried out by many hands. Shelomith covered her ears, then ripped her hands away again because her son's voice was calling and she could not pretend not to hear. Mother, he screamed, his voice cracking in fear and pain. Mother! She lurched forward, but the guards caught her arms. Stay back, they barked. He is my son, she wailed, thrashing against their grip. Let me go. Let me cover him, please. The guards held firm, their faces twisted between duty and pity. The circle of men rained stone after stone. Some faces were cold with resolve, others flinched with every throw, their lips pressed tight. Boys who had picked up small rocks glanced at one another, trembling, but dared not disobey. Avi stumbled to his knees, his arms raised weakly to shield his head. Blood streaked down his temple, dust clung to his clothes. Still, he lifted his face and shouted through the agony, "Mother, pray!" "I am praying," she cried, her voice breaking. "The Lord sees you, my son. He hears you even now." Her words carried into the circle, halting a few arms mid-swing. But the command of the Lord weighed heavier than pity. More stones flew. Avi's body sagged forward. His arms trembled, then dropped. His lips moved once more, barely audible, but Shelomith strained to catch it. "God, hear me." Then the final stone struck, and he was still. The crowd held its breath. Silence spread like a wave. The elders lowered their staffs. The guards released Shelomith's arms. She staggered into the circle, fell to the ground beside her son, and gathered what was left of him against her. Her sobs broke through the stillness, raw and unguarded. Some looked away, ashamed. Others murmured that justice had been done. A few children cried, confused by what they had seen. The man who had taunted Avi in the courtyard watched with a clenched jaw, his eyes unreadable. Moses stood at the edge of the circle, his face heavy with sorrow. Aaron leaned on his staff, his lips pressed in a tight line. Neither spoke. They knew the word had been the Lord's, yet even the Lord's word could break a mother's heart. Shelomith cradled her son's head against her lap, rocking back and forth as though she could lull him back to life. "Why?" she whispered through her sobs. Why could he not hold his tongue? Why did they provoke him so? Why must stones answer words? No one replied. The people began to drift away, some slowly, some quickly, leaving her in the circle of rocks with her grief. At last, a hand rested lightly on her shoulder. It was Moses. His voice was quiet, low enough only for her to hear. "Shelomith." The Lord's command was clear, but his heart is not cruel. He hears your sorrow. He knows your son was yours. She lifted her face, streaked with tears. He was mine, yes. But now, he is gone. What do I have left? Moses' gaze was steady. You have a choice. You can let his curse be the final word, or you can let your faith be. Her arms tightened around her son. What word do I have left, Moses? He looked down at her, then lifted his eyes toward the tabernacle. The word of the Lord. It endures even when our children fall. It is the word that binds us, that keeps us from tearing apart. She bowed her head, silent, trembling. The circle of stones lay heavy around her like a cruel crown. As night fell, the camp grew quiet again. But in the heart of Shelomith, nothing was quiet. Questions gnawed, grief pressed like a weight on her chest, and somewhere deep inside, one thought would not leave her. If words had led to stones, what would words lead to now? The next morning, the camp stirred as always. Fires crackled. Children played in courtyards, women ground grain for bread, and men carried wood for offerings. Yet for Shelomith, nothing felt the same. Where she walked, silence followed. People glanced her way and then quickly turned back to their tasks. Some avoided her altogether, slipping down side paths to keep from meeting her eyes. She carried a small jar of water to her dwelling, moving slowly, her shoulders heavy with exhaustion. Every step seemed louder than it should have been, as though the stones beneath her feet remembered what had happened the day before. As she set the jar down, two women nearby began speaking in hushed tones, not quiet enough to escape her hearing. "She raised him," one muttered. "Is it any wonder the boy spoke as he did?" "Still," the other answered, "her blood is Danite." It was his father's tongue that carried Egypt. Some things linger too long in a house. Shelomith's hands trembled on the jar. She wanted to shout at them, to tell them her son's words were not hers, that her heart had clung to the God of Israel with every breath she'd ever drawn. But the strength left her, and she only bowed her head and walked away. When she reached the shaded courtyard behind her dwelling, she finally sank to the ground. She pressed her forehead against her knees, her whole body shaking. She remembered Avi's last cry, the way he had lifted his voice in desperation. "Mother, pray for me." She had prayed. She still prayed. But the silence that followed weighed heavier than the desert sun. Her neighbor Asahel approached cautiously, carrying a basket of bread. "Shelomith," he said gently, "I thought you should eat." She lifted her eyes, red and swollen. "Eat? How can I eat when my son is buried under stones?" Asahel hesitated, then placed the basket near her anyway. "Because the Lord still gave you life, and he has not cast you away." She looked at him sharply. "Hasn't he? Look around, Asahel. They won't speak to me. They won't look at me. When they see me, all they see is the curse." He shifted uncomfortably. "They are afraid. That kind of sin shakes us all. It reminds us how close we stand to judgment ourselves." Shelomith closed her eyes. "Afraid? Then why do they whisper blame at me? Why do they point fingers as if my womb shaped his words?" Asahel sighed. "Because it is easier to blame than to grieve." For a long moment she said nothing. She stared at the ground where shadows of the courtyard vines danced in the wind. "I thought the name would be his refuge. I prayed over him as a child, sang psalms over his bed, told him the stories of the Red Sea and the manna. I thought the name would be his shelter, but it became the word that condemned him." Asahel knelt down so that his eyes were level with hers. "The name of the Lord was not weakened by your son's curse, nor is it stained by his fall. It is holy still. And maybe that is what you must cling to now." Her lips trembled. "And what of me? What is left for a mother with no son and no welcome among her people?" Before Asahel could answer, a child's ball rolled into the courtyard. A small boy ran after it, then stopped abruptly when he saw her. His eyes widened, and he snatched up the ball as though afraid even to stand near her. Without a word, he darted away. Shelomith's heart broke all over again. "Even the children flee from me," she whispered. Asahel opened his mouth, but closed it again. Finding no words, he picked up the basket, set it more firmly at her side, and stood. "You are not alone, Shelomith," he said softly. "Even when the camp turns away, the Lord sees you." Then he left her to her silence. She pressed her hands against her face. The whispers still carried from the street, faint but sharp, slicing into her like knives. Every word, every glance, every silence reminded her that her son's sin had not only cut his own life short, it had carved her place in Israel into something fragile and uncertain. And in that fragile place, a question burned in her heart. If my son was judged so quickly, what will become of me? That night, Shelomith could not sleep. She lay on her mat, staring into the dim glow of the lamp, her body still, but her mind restless. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw Avi's face, first twisted in anger, then contorted in fear, and finally broken beneath the rain of stones. The memory pressed so hard against her chest she could hardly breathe. At last she rose and stepped quietly into the courtyard. The night was hushed, the camp muffled in slumber. She sank to her knees on the worn stone floor and lifted her hands toward heaven. Her voice shook as she prayed. Lord, you are the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You led us through the sea, fed us with bread from heaven, gave us water from the rock. You are holy, and I do not question that. But hear me now, Lord. Hear a mother who is crushed under the weight of your judgment. My son is gone. My name is stained, and I cannot bear the silence. Did you hear him when he cried out to you? Did you turn your face away, or did you hold his soul when stones crushed his body? Her voice broke. She pressed her forehead to the ground, her sobs muffled against the stone. I cannot see the road ahead. If you still see me, Lord, then show me I am not forsaken. Give me one word, not for Israel, not for Moses, but for me. One word that tells me you have not cast me aside. Her prayer poured out until her throat was raw. At last her voice faded, leaving only the faint hiss of the wind and the creak of a nearby door. She stiffened. Someone was standing at the edge of the courtyard. Slowly, she lifted her head. In the shadows stood an elder, leaning on his staff. His face was hard to read in the dim light, but his presence carried authority. Shelomith, he said quietly, your voice carries in the night. Some will hear it and think you accuse the Lord of cruelty. She rose to her knees, her hands clenched. I accuse no one, she said, her voice hoarse. I plead. Is a mother not allowed to plead? The elder stepped closer. You must be careful. The people are uneasy. They wonder if the curse spoken by your son lingers over your house. Her eyes widened. A curse? Over me? He held her gaze. Fear spreads quickly, Shelomith. Some already whisper that your grief makes you dangerous, that you might bring bitterness into the camp. She staggered back as though struck. Bitterness? My heart is torn in two. I have lost my son. And now they would take even my mourning and call it sin? The elder's voice softened, though it carried no comfort. Grief is not sin. But if grief becomes rebellion, it poisons. I warn you, because the camp does not forget. Guard your words, daughter of Dibri. Guard your heart. He turned to leave, the sound of his staff tapping against stone fading into the night. Shelomith stood frozen in the courtyard, her body trembling. She whispered to the darkness, They killed my son for a word. And now they threaten me for mine. Her heart pounded. The whispers of the camp seemed louder than ever, even in the silence. She lifted her eyes upward once more, desperate, her voice breaking. Lord! Will you defend me, or will I be left to their stones too? By morning, the whispers had grown louder. Wherever Shelomith walked, conversations fell into uneasy silence. A woman who once shared bread with her pulled her children close and turned away. A group of men repairing a fence paused as she passed, their voices low, their eyes sharp with judgment. She is marked, one muttered. Her house is not clean, another replied. It was her blood in him, a third whispered. Shelomith's chest tightened. Every word felt like a stone hurled in secret. She carried a jar to the well, but when she stepped into line, the women shifted, leaving space between themselves and her as if her very presence carried danger. At last one of them, bold and sharp-tongued, spoke aloud. "Do you not hear the Lord's warning, Shelomith? Your son cursed the name, and now you pray in the night as though you question God's justice. How long before your bitterness spreads to the rest of us?" Shelomith's hands trembled on the jar. "You think I asked for this? You think I raised him to curse the Lord? I prayed for that boy every morning, every night. I whispered his name over him until he slept. And when he cried out for mercy, I begged heaven for his soul. Do you call that bitterness?" The woman's lip curled. "We call it dangerous. A mother's grief can turn to rebellion, and rebellion spreads like fire." The other women murmured in agreement. One pulled her veil tighter, another clutched her child's hand. Shelomith's eyes burned with tears, but her voice grew steady. "Be careful, sisters. You may call my grief rebellion, but the Lord sees the truth. Do not put words in his mouth." The well grew silent. For a moment, no one moved. Then the bold woman turned her back sharply, filling her jar with water as though the matter was finished. But the sting of her words lingered. By midday, an elder summoned Shelomith to the tabernacle court. She went with heavy steps, her stomach twisted in knots. The elders stood in a half circle, their faces solemn. Aaron was present, his staff in hand. "Shelomith," one elder said, "there is unrest among the people. Some fear your mourning is dangerous. They hear your prayers as complaint. They fear your sorrow dishonors the name." Her throat tightened. "And what would you have me do? Lock my voice in my chest until it strangles me? Pretend I have no grief? My son is gone. Am I forbidden to cry to God?" Aaron lifted his hand to still the murmuring. His eyes met hers, calm but piercing. "No one forbids prayer, Shelomith. But understand this. The Lord's name is holy. Even grief must bow before it. Do not let despair lead you to curse as your son did. That is the danger the people fear." She swallowed hard, her voice breaking. "I do not curse his name. I only ask if he still sees me. Does he?" Aaron studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "He sees. Do not doubt that. But you must choose whether your grief will drive you from him or toward him. That choice is yours." Her eyes filled with tears, but she straightened her shoulders. "Then I will choose to cling to him, even if all Israel whispers against me." Aaron's voice softened, just enough for her to hear. "That is the path of faith. Few walk it. Hold it fast." She bowed her head, then turned to leave. As she stepped out of the court, the stares of the people followed her. Some suspicious, some curious, a few almost softened. But when she returned to her dwelling, she found a stone lying at her doorstep. She bent to pick it up. It was small, smooth, harmless on its own, but heavy with meaning. Someone had left it there as a reminder of what her son's words had cost. Shelomith held the stone in her palm, her heart pounding. She looked over her shoulder, but no one stood near. The street was quiet, yet she felt the eyes of the camp watching from shadows. She clenched the stone in her fist, whispering through clenched teeth, "Will they bury me under stones too?" The stone in Shelomith's hand felt heavier with each passing hour. She placed it on the table inside her dwelling, but it seemed to follow her with its silent accusation. Each time she looked at it, her chest tightened, as though the camp had left its judgment inside her own home. That evening, a knock sounded at her door. She hesitated before opening it, half afraid to see another elder with warnings, or worse, a neighbor with scorn. But when she opened the door, she found an old woman standing there, bent with age, leaning on a staff, her eyes lined with years of sorrow. "Shelomith," the woman said softly, "may I come in?" Shelomith nodded, surprised. "Yes, of course." The woman stepped inside, her sandals brushing against the floor. She glanced at the stone on the table and shook her head slowly. "They think they remind you of judgment. But I see something else." "What do you see?" Shelomith asked, her voice wary. "A stone is lifeless," the woman replied, lowering herself onto a seat. "It is heavy, cold, unchanging. That is the judgment your son faced. But you, Shelomith, you are not stone. You are still living, and the Lord has not cast you aside." Shelomith's eyes filled with tears. "How can you say that?" "My son cursed his name. The whole camp watched him die for it. They look at me and see nothing but shame." The old woman reached across the table, her hand trembling but firm as it rested on Shelomith's. "I had a son too. Long ago he raised his hand against his brother in anger. He was struck down before my eyes. I thought the Lord had forsaken me, but in time he showed me I was still his. Even broken mothers are still seen by him." Shelomith's breath caught. "And did the people whisper against you too?" "They did," the woman said. "But the Lord's voice is louder if you choose to listen. Do not let the whispers drown him out." A silence stretched between them, heavy but not empty. For the first time since Avi's death, Shelomith felt a flicker of something she thought had been buried under the stones. Hope. Before she could speak again, shouts erupted outside. She rushed to the doorway. A group of men stood at the edge of her courtyard, pointing and muttering loudly. One raised his voice so all could hear. "Why does she remain among us? Her house is unclean. She defies the Lord with her cries at night. She should be sent away." Others echoed him, some uncertain, some bold. A small crowd began to gather, voices rising. Shelomith's stomach knotted. She turned back to the old woman, panic in her eyes. "Do you hear them?" "They will drive me out." The old woman steadied herself on her staff and looked Shelomith in the eyes. "Stand firm. Do not answer with anger. If you curse back, they win. Let the Lord fight for you." Shelomith's heart pounded. She stepped out into the courtyard, her hands shaking, her voice trembling but clear. "Brothers, sisters, what do you want from me? My son is already paid with his life. Must I be cast out too?" The man at the front spat on the ground. "We want no more curses from your house. We want peace." Her voice rose, stronger now. Peace does not come from casting out the broken. Peace comes from remembering that every one of us stands under the same holy name. You think me dangerous because I weep? Then know this: I weep before the Lord, not against him. The crowd muttered, unsettled. Some lowered their eyes, but others gripped stones in their hands, uncertain, ready. At that moment, a shadow fell across the courtyard. Moses himself had come, flanked by elders. His voice rang out, firm and commanding. "Enough!" The crowd fell silent. The stones slipped from hands. Moses' gaze swept over them, then rested on Shelomith. "The Lord's name is holy, yes. But do not forget, he is also merciful. Do not put upon this woman what the Lord himself has not spoken." He turned to the men at the front. "Go back to your tents. Let her mourn. Let her live. The Lord will judge each heart in his own time." The crowd slowly dispersed, some muttering, others chastened. When the last had gone, Moses looked at Shelomith. His expression was heavy, but kind. Your road will not be easy, daughter of Dibri. But the Lord does not despise a broken heart. Tears streamed down her face, but she bowed her head. Then let him see mine. And as she returned inside, she realized the stone on her table no longer seemed quite so heavy. In the days that followed, Shelomith carried herself differently. The grief still pressed heavy on her chest, but the panic that once clawed at her heart had begun to loosen its grip. She no longer hid in corners or lowered her eyes when others passed. She walked slowly, steadily, her head bowed not in shame, but in prayer. The whispers did not stop entirely. Some neighbors still muttered as she went by. Children still glanced at her with wide, uncertain eyes. But after Moses' words, no one dared to throw stones at her doorstep again. And though her house felt emptier than it ever had, it no longer felt cursed. One evening, Shelomith returned to the clearing outside the camp where Avi had fallen. The stones still lay scattered in the dust, pale reminders of what had been done. She knelt down and picked one up, holding it in her hand. Its surface was rough, sharp on one side, worn smooth on the other. Her voice was quiet but steady. You ended his life, but you will not end mine. She closed her eyes. Lord, you saw my son in his anger. You saw him in his fear, and you saw him in his last breath when he called out to you. I trust you did not turn away, and I trust you have not turned from me. Footsteps crunched behind her. It was the old woman who had visited her days before. She lowered herself to the ground beside Shelomith, her staff planted firmly in the dirt. You came back here, she said softly. Yes, Shelomith answered, not to curse, to remember, and to ask the Lord to teach me what to do with this sorrow. The old woman nodded. Then listen closely. A broken heart offered to God is not wasted. It becomes a testimony. Your son's words tore him down, but your words, your prayers, your faith, they can lift others up. Shelomith breathed deeply. You mean the camp will remember me not only for his curse, but for how I carried it? Exactly, the woman said. They will remember if you let grief become bitterness, or if you let it become faith. That choice is still in your hands. Shelomith looked down at the stone in her palm. Slowly she set it back among the others. Then let them remember that I clung to the Lord even when my arms were empty. The old woman smiled faintly. That is the kind of story that lasts longer than whispers. Days later, Shelomith returned to her courtyard. Neighbors still watched her carefully, but something in their eyes had changed. They no longer looked only with suspicion, but with a trace of respect. Some nodded as she passed. Others said nothing, but did not turn away. One afternoon, a young mother approached with her child in hand. Her voice was hesitant. Shelomith, I am sorry for how I treated you. I was afraid, but your strength has shown me something. Would you pray for my son? Shelomith's throat tightened, but she nodded. She placed her hands on the boy's head and whispered words of blessing, simple but heartfelt. The mother wept quietly, and for the first time in many days, Shelomith's heart felt lightened. That night, as she knelt to pray, her words were clear and firm. Lord, my son is gone, but I am still here. Use me, even in my sorrow. Let my pain point others to your holiness. Let my weakness show your strength. And let them see that even a broken mother can still belong to you. Her tears fell freely, but they no longer felt like chains. They felt like offerings. The camp would never forget the day a young man cursed the name and stones answered him. But neither would they forget his mother, Shelomith, daughter of Debri, who walked through fire and refused to let her grief turn her away from God. And so her story became more than tragedy. It became a warning, yes, but also a testimony that the name of the Lord is holy, and that even in judgment, he is near to the brokenhearted.